All right, welcome back. So, had an icebreaker question, right, Andrew? What animal?
What animal would you be if you could be any animal?
Well, I don't know if this is cheating, but I would probably either be a dolphin or a hawk. Those both sound like very freeing and not high threat of being other animals' food.
That's true. That's true. Freeing. I like dolphins. Dolphins are cool.
What about you?
I would be a jellyfish.
Huh.
I think I'd be a jellyfish. Yeah. Because it just swims and goes with the flow, but if you fuck with it, it stings you.
That's interesting. Usually people say like cat or bird. I think that's the first time I've heard jellyfish, so that's cool.
And they glow in the dark, some of them.
Oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So today we were going to talk about, I guess, like being able to voice what we're feeling and needing out of our relationships. And I mean, I think this is something that this is a personal growth area for me, not just a growth area related to peer support. Um, I think it's we're really taught to like not talk about our feelings or sometimes intellectualize or to out of the idea of like active listening to kind of reflect back and say what we think somebody else is feeling. So I think or a lot of people don't have that awareness, and it's something that can be built, but it's often encouraged. And it's interesting thinking about how like people end up kind of stuck in these patterns, and like for folks who are kind of used to just talking everything about everything in like the context of their mental health or their addiction or their diagnosis or whatever, it's like having anything outside of those conversations becomes really difficult, and um, they might be used to having interactions that aren't really authentic, like the other person is just trying to listen to them, and then going out into the world where not everybody has that training or experience. um, it can just be a really, really big disconnect. I also think we don't give people enough credit for like being able to say what we are feeling and what the impact is, and that people might have a desire to grow, um, and to reflect on that, that impact that they had on somebody else. Like hearing that can like invite self-reflection that maybe there hasn't been that invitation before.
Yeah. Especially if it's honest.
Yeah, it makes me think of a interaction I had where like I felt so guilty, but I had this like really authentic reaction of when someone was sharing something with me, and I was like, oh, I just made this noise like,
Yeah,
and he was like, oh, can you tell me more about that noise you just made?
that's a
And
that's cool that he asked that.
yeah, and I was like, well, honestly, when you shared that story, I just had this reaction of like, you know, I can't remember exactly what was said, but essentially it was like an argument with his girlfriend. And I told him that, if my husband said that to me, I would feel like the conversation was just totally shut down. It wouldn't feel like an invitation to have further exploration or discussion. It would feel like a passive aggressive statement that, you want to end the conversation. But it sounds like what you actually wanted was to talk about it more. And he was like, "Thank you for sharing that with me." And that was kind of cool.
Yeah,
Even though I felt like a little bit guilty that I just like made this like grossed out noise. It was authentic.
it was authentic. Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
um. So yeah, I think there's there's not enough of that. Um, and it's hard too because like even with myself, I have been like trying to notice just in myself what I'm feeling more often just as a part of therapy. And um, it's just odd thinking about like times where I went like a really long time not understanding how I was feeling or being able to name what I was feeling, but just being like totally overwhelmed. um, so yeah, it's like cool that more often than not now I can like figure out if I, sit with it, what I'm feeling, but it is still hard to say it sometimes, especially if it's in the context of a behavioral health setting. That's not something you're really encouraged to do. In fact, you're encouraged to, not take things personally, and it's not about you, it's about them, kind of thing.
Which is true to an extent, but I find with myself that with working in behavioral health, I'm really frustrated that I'm censoring myself so much, and I mean, it's on me, but I don't like overthinking things and having to think of, okay, what's the right way to say this thing? It just feels very frustrating, and yet it feels compulsory. It feels like it's
Mm.
like nowadays almost involuntary. It just happens, and I'm
Yeah,
trying to be aware of that, I guess.
it's interesting too because I have over the years heard people say that, for example, they feel like being trauma informed isn't actually authentic because, that this person I was talking to was telling me they don't want their feelings protected. They want to be actually held accountable, um, even though they've experienced trauma. Like, they want to know what the impact they're having is and not just, go around potentially like causing harm and not know it. And so what they were kind of telling me is like it feels like a lot of therapy is really not authentic at all. And like I guess to a certain extent, sure. um I also think it's really it's hard to, because of, wanting to fit in potentially, and um, other things, reactivity around like saying the wrong thing, wrong air quotes thing. Um, it can be natural to start to self censor. And, you know, sometimes, if I'm really, really mad or something, and I'm like, I just gotta keep my mouth shut right now. Sometimes it's a good thing because, if I did like say my true thoughts in like a group setting, that might not be the most productive thing in the moment. It could just be me like taking over this setting that wasn't made for that. There's not that space created for that. Um, or maybe I want to like wait until I'm more regulated to be able to say or like approach the situation in a way where I'm not causing harm. I mean, I guess it's impossible to go through life and not cause harm to other people in, small ways.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially when we're talking about like our own emotions, because
yeah,
it's even with I statements, it's like still being able to convey that emotion. It seems like the key is like being able to convey how we feel without necessarily jumping to blaming the other person, or it's
right.
like like I remember when in a previous job that we both worked at. I'm bringing this up because I feel like really proud of that moment because I had a conversation with my supervisor where I was just blunt with her about how I was feeling, and I said, "This feels very unjust to me," and
Mm.
I just remember being able to speak clearly and directly and honor what I felt, and at the same time, there was an invitation there for her to also kind of come in and share. Um, but sometimes it's hard. I don't know. It's hard to tell too. Sometimes.
I think it has to be safe in some ways, I guess, to do so. Um, I'm just thinking of like experiences I've had with emotion being treated as a bad thing. And but then sometimes like I don't know, it's kind of like a weird dichotomy. I've
Hmm.
had a theme this week of like boundaries, and it's come up where like my anger is like my boundary. But I don't like getting snappy with people. Um, but there was a situation this week where I was just like, can we just do this thing? And I didn't like getting to that point where I'm like, stop. And, but afterwards, the person actually thanked me, and they were like, I appreciate you, you know, being assertive and holding me accountable. And I was like, oh, but it's like
Yeah.
it feels icky though. But I don't know if it's like, am I letting the ick out, or is it like a way I don't want to be or something? It's, yeah, and maybe that means I need to set the boundary earlier before I'm like totally like amygdala hijacked.
And that's what anger is there for, to tell us when a boundary's been crossed.
Yeah.
Whether
Yeah.
that's a real boundary or not, at least we're perceiving it as such.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I have gotten a little better, especially in the last year, of being like, hey, I'm frustrated. I think that like frustration feels like a safer emotion, even if it's really like I'm pissed off, I'm angry. Frustrated sounds like softer. um,
Yeah,
but maybe
it's
that
triggered
also
there.
like causes others to like underestimate what I'm actually feeling.
Yeah,
But it's not, I don't know. I think I just worry so much about the impact because I'm like, if I came in and I was like, Andrew, I'm pissed off at you. That's not like an invitation to like have a conversation.
or,
um,
or
at
maybe it
least in my
is.
well, yeah, I suppose, but not like um, hmm.
But you could also say
Maybe
it
I
as
take the
like,
invitation as like warm, not spiky, spiky invitation.
I think you could be pissed off and be like, "Hey, Andrew, I'm pissed off because of this."
Yeah, yeah, I'm pissed off because this thing happened.
Anger is so fucking weird. It I feel like a huge part of my process with healing is getting in touch with my anger and being able to like express it and own it and not shove it away. And sometimes I do feel guilty because it does come out in the wrong way, or I go down these loops, these angry loops where I kind of obsess about slights that have happened to me or wrongs,
Mm,
whatever. Like, I just ruminate on it.
yep.
But it's like, I think I'm ruminating because I'm not being able to do anything with the anger. I'm not able to, like, it's like stuck. Like, the anger
Well,
itself is stuck. It's not moving.
yeah, if you feel like you don't have a voice, then yeah, it's gonna get stuck in there.
So it's like, it's not the anger that's the problem. It's like the resistance to the anger that's really the issue. It's not something's not being expressed.
Well, I think this makes me think of two things. One, in noticing my emotions more, is been really hard for me to recognize like how often I am angry. Is like, dang, I'm angry a lot of the time, and people don't see me that way. I mean, I think some people see me as passive aggressive, but that's probably why, if I'm like freaking angry all the time, I'm probably gonna, it's probably gonna come out in other ways.
Yeah.
Um, and two, I think some of that is modeling, in whatever your environment you're in. Because just yesterday, I had an experience where I was in a meeting, and earlier in the day, I had met with my boss one on one, and I was like, I'm pissed off about this and that and this other thing. And I was just like, ah. And then the other meetings during the day were group meetings. So I was like, oh, I gotta, cool it down now. Um, and then later in the day, my supervisor was like, well, Nybelle has noticed some issues like X, Y, and Z, and like kind of like breaking down our earlier conversation and then sharing that with the group. And then that invited me to be like, yeah, I don't think in that moment I necessarily said like I'm angry, but I did say that I really want to have like higher expectations for other people. Um, other managers, and that it's really difficult to continue doing the same things and feel like there isn't a culture of just holding each other accountable regardless of your title, instead of more of a hierarchical way of doing things. And it was kind of like a mic drop moment, because then after that we just had to end the meeting. But it felt nice to just be like, hey, I don't have an ego about my title or anything like that. I don't care if somebody wants to, I supervise someone on the org chart and another staff person wants to tell them, hey, I noticed this thing happened and I'm wondering if like there could have been a different possibility here. I'm not going to be like, you talked to my staff.
Mhm.
I don't care about that. What I care about is us all growing so that we can be there for folks receiving services and get good services. I At the end of the day, even though like I really don't do that much direct service anymore, that's what I care about, is that people who come in to these systems have a good experience. And I just get so tired of like getting caught up in that petty bullshit. It's like, let's just cut through all of this, who's going to supervise who, and then who's going to do the disciplinary action, and blah, 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 blah. Why are we focused on that? We need to have accountability conversations, not be worried about like who's the supervisor, because, well, first of all, it's inefficient, and secondly, it doesn't create a sense of community. It's just like we're all in little silos.
You said your focus ultimately, even though you're not in direct service anymore, is to make sure people have good service.
Yeah, that they're having a good experience
Good
when they come
experience.
into these services. Um, so, if for example, like, I don't know, say we work together at a drop-in center, and you see me like I keep going into someone's personal bubble and I'm like not aware of it. They keep like scooting away and I keep like getting back close because, I'm like really engaged. I'm trying to talk to them or whatever. And the other person's like, and for, whatever reason, maybe I'm like really passionate about something. I just don't notice it, but you see it. Like, I guess I would hope, it doesn't have to be like in that moment you call me out or something, but that later you'd be like, hey, Nybelle, I noticed like you were talking to this person and they were kind of like this, and you kept like leaning in more, and it kind of seemed like they wanted a little more space, and just being able to have a conversation about that. Also, the other person in that dynamic should also feel safe to say to me, hey, Nybelle, you're in my personal bubble.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe I don't have that type of um, rapport with them yet. We don't have that kind of relationship yet. So, like, if you give me feedback, then I can go back to that person the next time we meet and say, hey, I wanted to check in because I realized I may have been in your personal bubble last time we met. Is that, how you were feeling? And then be able to go from there, use that feedback. rather than um, I'm in somebody's personal bubble, they're doing this, I'm like, blah, blah, blah. And then you go to your coworker and you're like, God, Nybelle doesn't know how to respect people's personal bubble. And then they're like, yeah, I see she does that all the time. And, there was this other time that da 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 da. And then, this person continues to be like, I'm really uncomfortable right now. And then they don't come back because every time they come to the drop in center, Nybelle's like in their personal bubble, right?
It's turned into this passive aggressive issue with the coworkers instead of it just being direct and open.
Yeah. And then if I find out, Andrew's been gossiping with my coworkers, I'm like, what the hell? My feelings are so hurt.
Yeah.
Why didn't Andrew just come and talk to me? And then it's just like nothing gets done because there's all these hurt feelings. And maybe it becomes a bigger issue than if you just walked up to me and said, hey, let's check it out.
Yeah.
Because I think, I don't know, I've learned so much from other people that it's just like missed opportunities to not have those conversations, I feel.
It just creates more drama and stress too if you don't have them. It's unnecessary. It just riles things up.
Yeah, but that is not what's modeled for people at all.
Yeah.
um, and in fact, like some people, when I'm just like, hey, let's talk about this, there can be a lot of discomfort with that. And I've seen people just kind of like shut down. Like when I just even say like, can we, just communicate regularly about this? Like, let me know what's going on. And it's just kind of like freeze response. So I think people don't know how to have conflict in a way that's like safe.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And I think because of some of the relationships I've fostered and like the way that, like, as an intentional peer support trainer, every day at the end of the day we talk about what went well and other possibilities for for each other, and like getting in that habit of feedback. And like there have been times that I've trained with someone and there's a disconnect of like, man, I feel like I wasn't able to say hardly anything and you just talked like 90% of the time. Or you interrupted me when I was trying to talk about my section or whatever. And then actually like going through, okay, I've had solutions like, if you feel like I'm talking too much, we have this like little stuffed football, and like throw the football at me.
Does anyone
And
do that?
actually, once we did that and had it as like a plan, then I didn't need to use the football, because then the other person had the self-awareness at that point to be like, okay, I need to sit on my hands for a while so Nybelle can talk.
Hmm.
So it's one of those things that requires practice, and it's not something that's taught in a lot of settings. And I don't know. It's just interesting to me when, like, I've had people say that I'm like blunt or really direct, and I still feel like I'm holding back a lot of the time. So that dichotomy is just very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And
Something.
I feel like when I do say something, it's because like a lot of times I've been hanging on to it for so long that it's like I gotta say something. So it's interesting when like my anger gets to a point where I no longer like can stay silent and it just kind of like blips out like randomly, and
Hmm.
then people around me are like, "Oh, the boundary, I found it."
Yeah.
And in some ways it's nice because then it's like automatic boundary, but it's not, it doesn't feel good to be like that emotionally dysregulated either.
Because it's built up over time until it's reached a tipping point.
Yeah.
That's how I feel too. There's sort of this investment I feel with myself in don't like saying it, trying to portray myself as a nice person who's rational and even keel, and even when I'm under the surface like boiling and like sometimes I just want to punch someone and scream.
Yeah, I feel that.
And then
And
people will tell me sometimes, "Oh, you're such a sweet guy," and like you've never heard a fly. It's like makes me think like if you really knew everything that was going on inside me, like what would you think then? Would you still want to talk to me?
hmm, I think a lot of people probably feel that way.
And it sucks. It really sucks to like keep all that stuff in because it's like it takes I think a lot of effort and energy to contain it.
Well, yeah, and it's hard to know like I think I'm still exploring different ways of like letting that out because, I think talking can be one outlet, but it can also get to a point of like you talk so much that you're just like tired of talking. It's like, some kind of movement is good, or like, um, the other day I just, I used to have, because now I don't have as consistent of a commute to work. I used to like always sing in the car or whatever, and so now I'm like um trying to like make a little more time to, if I'm at home alone or I can go into a garage or something, like um singing along with music a little bit, and that provides a different kind of release. I've been experimenting with like it's weird to say as an atheist, but like kind of like a prayer or something in the morning or at night, because I find it really difficult to meditate in silence, and prayer kind of stimulates a similar part of the brain with meditation. So I was like, why don't I just like try praying to whatever, whatever I feel like in
Yeah,
that moment. And I mean, I think it's been kind of helpful.
kind of like a mantra,
Mm,
like a
maybe.
long mantra.
Yeah, well, some long, some short.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think sometimes there can be an over value placed on venting, especially to other people who are not involved in the situation, versus like directly addressing it with the person, or finding some kind of other release that involves engaging different parts of the body or brain.
Yeah. Lately, I've been hitting my bed more, just punching my pillows and stuff. And
Yeah, I had that recommended to me, and I didn't really like it for some reason. I mean, I think well, that was probably because some of it was like related to like letting out anger towards a specific person, and imagine their face on the pillow or whatever, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
this is weird. I don't feel like it's really like aligns with my values.
yeah, that is weird. I wouldn't do that. I just take the emotion. I just move it out of my body. Just
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, I like doing some like, um, like a 10-minute Zumba on YouTube thing and like dance along with it, or
yeah,
just do some weird flowy shit in my
yeah,
room.
yeah.
Just move the body in a different way, especially because a lot of times for work I'm sitting. So, um,
Yeah, I think it's good to have an
sometimes,
outlet for if it's like overflowing and it's reached like a pitch where it just has to have some kind of outlet. But it's good to find a way. I really want to find a way to integrate it because I feel like more so lately, for some reason, I've been taking on this identity of like a passive, nervous person who isn't able to speak his mind. And I've been through phases of my life where that wasn't so much a challenge. So, and I've always had this problem to some degree, but feels like I haven't had much of a respite from it. It's been like ongoing for almost the past year, and I need some kind of not escape from it, but just an integration. Because I know this is not all of who I am, but for some reason it's just become like a fixed identity, and um, I know I'm wrestling with the anger.
hmm.
I know that's part of it. That's part of the thing that like I'm censoring. Like I'm just it's like I'm needing assertiveness and boldness and being able to just speak my mind directly and not trip myself up. And um, something's getting
Being
in the way
able
of
to do, yeah, well, being able to do that is hard, at least for me. Um, I think personally, like being in a leadership position has helped create opportunities for that, but not everybody has that opportunity. But management is not the only form of leadership, so there can also be other ways to be a leader that aren't necessarily the traditional power hierarchy. So I'm not saying that's like what's going to work for you, but I think having opportunities um, to use my voice and be able to speak my mind in a setting that was safe, like, I'm not saying it's perfect now by any means, but I think that really helped me to get out of that, like, anxious, not wanting to upset others thing. Um, I'm still terrified of, upsetting other people or whatever. But it's also not good to just, like, hold it all in, because I think people sense it in other ways when you don't express it.
For sure. If it doesn't come out appropriately in the moment, it can also come out not in the best ways later on too.
That's true, and it's just like the very nature of, like, somebody being passive aggressive is because of that type of masking, where, like, because intuitively as humans we can still sense that something's off, the other person is angry or upset, and, like, sometimes I even, like, in myself feel like if someone is being kind of passive aggressive, it's like I see it on their face, their expression, they're, like, smiling, but then inside I have this, like, weird uncomfortable feeling, or it
Mm-hmm.
just, like, feels kind of wrong, and there's that discord, and there's a reason for that, because you can try to hide and fake it all you want, but there's still something, in our mirror neurons or whatever, that we pick up on that.
Yeah.
All I'm thinking right now is passive aggressive Portland.
Yeah. I was just thinking back to this uh, workshop I hosted a few years back, and one of the things that came up on that is when you're supporting someone. It was on supporting altered states, but I think it applies to everyone. When you're supporting someone and you're coming from a fearful state, that can influence their state and exacerbate their fear. So
Yeah.
that's why it's important to approach someone who's in an extreme state with genuine calmness or optimism, or even like unconditional positive regard or compassion.
Yeah.
Um, a trick one of my teachers taught me is to just like imagine the person being happy and fulfilled in your mind as you're talking to them. Like that's a useful hack sometimes if you need to get to that. Um,
Yeah. Usually, what I try to do is, like, with I don't know. I think with almost everyone I've met, I don't know. There's at least one thing I like about them, or, something that I'm like, I can focus on this thing that I find positive or likable, one aspect,
yeah,
and, like, just try to think of them around that. Um, but yeah, I think that's super true. Like, I think, like, when I was in an altered state, part of why it was so overwhelming was, having my empathy, like, in overdrive. And so I could tell if somebody was being, like, really freaking rude, condescending. I was like, what the heck is your problem?
uh-huh.
And then I could really feel if, like, somebody was being genuine, and it was like, you know, it felt good, but it's also like I remember those moments, even though, like, I don't remember a lot of being in altered states. I remember the really good and the really bad, because it was just like throughout my entire body. I could really, really feel it.
Yeah. It's pretty remarkable. And if you call someone out when you're in that state, the a lot of people will just gaslight you too if it's something that makes them uncomfortable. Like they don't want to be called out on being whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I've
think
seen
despite
that.
my altered state, a lot of times when I was calling people out in that, there was a thread of truth.
Yeah.
So it's not, something I aspire to in my daily life at this point.
Yeah.
Um,
I've had
but
people like pick up on really subtle things when I was holding
yeah,
space for them in altered states. Like, um, that things that were even like so specific, like it kind of unsettled me that they picked that stuff up. Like, oh my God, like what else are you picking up on? Like, it's really quite
yeah,
remarkable.
I've had that happen where like I'm like holding space with somebody and they're on a different planet, and then they look at me and they're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Whoa."
Yeah.
I was just chilling.
It's like, yeah, I really hope people who support people in altered states keep in mind that it's not either or, black and white. Like they can totally have experiences that you're not experiencing, but they can also totally be picking up on things that are absolutely valid, that are like in between the lines. Like
Yeah, it's true.
it's like that old saying that I think has truth to it. Like there's a fine line between madness and genius. Like I think that kind of fits in with that idea. Like,
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, I mean, just think about like what we know of famous inventors and like,
yeah,
things like that where artists, yeah,
Nikola Tesla said that aliens would send designs into his mind and he would hear voices and stuff. So
maybe aliens were sending stuff into his mind. We don't know.
that's possible too. um, but yeah, I was kind of so that came up because I was thinking of how I've just been feeling so out of alignment lately and not
Mm.
as present as I'd like to be, and um, I feel like it makes it harder to hold space for people when you're like that. Like it's not,
Of course.
yeah, it's just yeah. So that was coming up, just kind of some checking in with myself about that. Um,
Well, do you feel like you have to always hold space for other people? Like, who's holding space for you?
yeah. Well, so we talked about earlier, like the kind of the theme around having authentic relating and that whole thing, and um, something I want to tie that into is I'm just going to put it out there and be curious what your thoughts are on this because I've been really struggling with this. I think it's something a lot of us can relate to, especially as peers. So this idea of the victim mentality,
Mm.
and I'm trying to have a balanced perspective on that. So it's like there have definitely been people in situations where I've held space for them and given support, and it would feel like me just putting my energy into a black hole, and I would give, and they just would want more, 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 but they would never
Hmm.
really seem to do anything to help themselves. And then, as a peer, trying to keep in mind this idea that we don't want to pass judgment too quickly onto people. And if someone is coming from a place of, you could say, neediness, like, it's because there's an unmet need deep down there. And so it's not that they're like, it's like the idea, like, we wouldn't want to call someone a manipulator who is leveraging certain behaviors or things to get those needs met. Like, um, we would just want to recognize, okay, this person has these unmet needs. But I think the hang up there is when so this ties in with myself. This is kind of like a long-winded way of answering your question. um, I fall into this sometimes. I fall into this sometimes of I'll get stuck in a loop and I'll be talking about all the things that are going wrong in my life and what's not working. And to an extent, that is maybe it helps get the pressure out and it's nice to feel heard. But then past a certain point, it just feels like it's not healthy and it's just reinforcing like this pattern that I'm in. And it starts to, um, it creates a reality. You know, it creates a reality like, okay, this is my reality. Everything's shit. I can't do anything about it. You know, that's an exaggeration, but like, even just feeling that 80% of the time is it's enough to feel hopeless. And and I feel like it takes energy from people. I feel like it disempowers me and it takes energy from people.
How do you feel like it disempowers you?
Because I feel like when I get stuck in that mentality, I can look for endless things that are wrong, and I'll start searching through my past of this trauma is why I'm feeling this way, or this is why. Like I noticed this a lot when I was researching narcissistic abuse,
Mm.
and in the beginning, and even to some extent, still sometimes now, it's helpful to like for me to recognize those patterns and to understand what narcissism is and how it actually operates in relationships, and that's not always like the overt, obvious example that we think of someone who just thinks they're better than everyone else and wants you to praise them. Like that's just the most cliche example, but narcissism has so many other ways it manifests itself. Sometimes really subtle ways. And so like learning about that was really helpful for me to see those patterns in some people in my life and to start to stand up to those people when I saw those patterns come up. So it was empowering at first, and then it became disempowering, I think, when I started to hyper focus on that and look for patterns everywhere, sort of.
Yeah.
And then start to think about like, oh, I have all these problems now because I had narcissistic abuse growing up. Like starting to use it as like a unified field theory for my problems, and it's not.
I I think there's something that can feel really good about being told a story about ourselves. Like listening to, I don't know, I'll use like um some like on YouTube there are some therapists who will go into long monologues about like, you know, these things happen because of, this trauma, this attachment theory, XYZ. And I think there is maybe like a comfort in that of like it's not my fault.
Yeah,
And I could see how that could also like swirl into a victim mentality, when I was hearing you share about like learning about narcissism, I was kind of thinking about when I first learned about the term gaslighting, and it was like this big revelation of like, oh, so that's what he was doing, and kind of like looking at all these experiences that I'd had in a totally different way, and it's like, whoa, just like opened up the box of like, now I can protect myself from this, and it's like putting together a puzzle or something. But then it's really hard too, because if we keep looking for something, we're going to find it.
yeah.
So,
It's like there's this thing that kicks in, like I don't ever want to be abused like that again, and so it's like this protective mechanism, and so
it kind of sounds like the persecutor role.
the persecutor role.
Yeah. Like not wanting to be a victim again, and kind of like blaming others as a way to get a need met.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And it's messy too, because
Yeah.
I think what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to see that we all have some kind of problem of one sort or another, and we all do things that can be unhealthy at times. Like
Yeah.
even when I was reading up on narcissism, I saw a lot of that in myself. I saw a lot of covert narcissism in myself.
Yeah, so I was gonna say that, my experience in this last, week or so, I was kind of having similar of like, oh, everybody else is a narcissist. Now, what if I'm a narcissist? And realistically, it's not possible for all of us to be. I
Yeah,
think there is like a quality of like everyone is going to have varying levels of ego, confidence, over or under confidence, um, feeling correct in their views, and yeah, I just something that I really appreciate about one of the support groups that I go to for survivors is that there's not just a mission of like supporting survivors, but they also do other things to basically work with people who have been abusers in the past so they don't continue that pattern. Because I think kind of what has happened in a lot, majority normative society is like, okay, now we can identify these people and avoid them. But all that does is say, I want to avoid them so they can abuse somebody else. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying like all narcissists are abusers or something like that, but rather than like, how can we make this different?
Right. Yeah.
And that's not everyone's mission. That's not on all of us. Especially, it's hard if you have really like been a victim of narcissistic abuse or other types of abuse, and it can be really easy to like fall back into that pattern. So I think it's not like we gotta go out there and try to, change people individually. Um, but I think it's more of like a collective effort of like having that accountability. I think about how, a lot of my abuse didn't happen behind closed doors, happened in front of other people who didn't say shit. So why was our community not holding this person accountable?
Right. That's a good point.
Why
That's a
did
really
his
good point.
family see that and they're like, oh, he's kind of an asshole sometimes, but they weren't like, stop, you
Yeah.
don't treat people this way.
Why, someone actually told me why they never did that in the past with me, when they saw the person who was doing this to me doing it in front of them, and they said that they were just afraid of that person too. They didn't, because this person wasn't just doing that toward me. It was like it was other people too. So this, yeah. Sometimes I think people, when if they do recognize it at all, I think a lot of this also goes undetected. People just don't even know what's happening. But when they do recognize it, they also might have been at the receiving end of that at some point too, or are still on the receiving end of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of like drama is just like normalized abuse.
Yeah,
Um, and I think it's a collective unhealthiness of how we navigate those relationships. Um, and I think about like this last week, I've had my lid flipped and talked to multiple people, and I keep, you know, my experience was like I kept getting that lid flip reinforced of like, yep, you gotta avoid this person, creeper, stay away. And then actually talking to someone else who gave me a different perspective of like, well, maybe there's this other possibility. And it's like, after I was able to have that conversation, it was like, oh, like, I'm not in this trauma response anymore. Maybe a little bit still, but definitely not to the extent that I was. Um, so it's hard because I think there's something about like being in that state, even though I know it's not good for me, not good for my body to be under that stress constant, there's still something that kept me looking at different resources online, information, talking to people, having it reinforced more. And it was hard to hear something that didn't fit inside of that narrative at first. You know, it's like I almost didn't want to believe it, but then it was kind of like alignment of actually this might make sense. And that's not every situation. And I think that, you know, we have to have our own boundaries too of like, man, I don't give a fuck if my abuser has changed at this point. He can do whatever the hell he wants. He can stay far away from me. And that whole friend group is toxic as shit. So, you know, I hope the best for them. I hope that that's not the dynamic that they have anymore, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. And that's a choice I have to make for myself of like choosing people that I see as healthy and that don't keep me in that lid flip, you know, trauma activation state.
I think for me it was so fresh because it happened earlier this year that I had some encounters that both activated me by these people and gave me the chance to like stand up for myself to them. And neither of those situations went well. So and they were both close people in my life. Like they weren't just like acquaintances, like they were people who've been in my life for a long time. So it was, I think, really difficult to just move past that. I think I'm still healing from it, and yeah. So
well, I think that loss of connection can be extremely painful.
yeah,
Did you feel, well, how did you like feel when being able to voice how you really felt?
great. In the moment, it felt great, and even after the fact, especially with the first person, because it had been something that had been building up to that moment for a long time. And I think I did a really good job at even voicing my boundaries. So he knew not to cross them. And when he still crossed them, I felt good about responding the way I did because I was able to channel my anger, but also do it in a calm way somehow. It feels like mysterious to talk about this now when I feel like I'm light years from that, but this was just like in February, and somehow I was able to do that. I don't know really how, but maybe just because I'd reached my breaking point. I don't know, and yeah, I felt like I was able to honor the anger and at the same time be diplomatic about it and be honest and blunt, and also um, not cause a scene. Um, and it triggered him to cause a scene, which was the way he responded to me was like confirmation that yeah, this is I'm doing and saying the right things. I'm not just making this up. And
Well, it sounds like that wasn't working for the both of you.
Yeah, I think I met a need he had to prop up his ego, honestly.
Hmm.
And when I was no longer willing to put up with that, he, I think it threatened that need for him. There was some level of codependency with it.
Yeah, that's hard. Hmm.
And I
I
still
mean,
feel in his heart he's a good person, and I still respect a lot of things about him. And it's not like we had a terrible friendship or anything, but there was definitely a running theme there that was just never addressed. And um, when I tried to address it, it just wasn't respected. So um, I just realized that that's my line.
yeah. I mean, I think that speaks to like accountability and boundaries.
Yeah,
Um, we can be authentic and be like, I don't want to see you again because you crossed my boundaries so many times.
well, I'm trying to think of a way to tie this all together. And
Well, I think
oh,
that I forgot to say it earlier, but I think that what you were kind of talking about in terms of, you know, what you said was like a victim mentality. I feel like it kind of connects back to what I was talking about at the beginning when people have one way of communicating, usually not, what's not going well in these behavioral health settings, and then it's kind of
yeah,
like these one-way relationships. So,
exactly.
um, yeah, I mean, I've had similar experiences in my personal life of just being like, I've had to go both ways where I'm just like venting all the time and I'm not picking up on the fact that people don't want to hear it constantly. But then I've had others where people are just like emotionally dumping on me and I'm like, we hardly know each other. What is
Hmm.
happening? And then
Yeah,
I say something and it's like, the wrath. Um, so yeah, I think it it probably speaks to just like how we don't know. A lot of us don't know how to have that back and forth um, in conversations, in relationships. It's something that I aspire to, obviously. Um, and I think in some ways, like, I've been able to achieve some of that mutuality, but only with few people. Um, so yeah, I think some of it involves like moving towards something different. It, some of us have to take risks of like, even if it's not going to be perfect, being able to voice what we're feeling or a boundary or something and see where that goes instead of like the pattern of like not saying anything and venting to other people, and maybe we feel a little bit better for a while but not really,
yeah,
and then it's just kind of continues.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I wonder if as sort of a close closing statement or something, um, we could each talk about we could each give ourselves like a minute or something to just air out one thing that has been really frustrating us or like something that we've been wanting to say that we've been holding ourselves back on, and we can just give ourselves permission to just put it out unfiltered.
Oh, it's funny because I have so many that like my mind is going blank.
Yeah, there's a lot too, but whatever feels, it could be the first thing that comes up. It could be whatever.
There's still like three things
Okay,
fighting in my brain.
okay,
Um. Okay, here we go.
okay.
If you're paid $90,000 a year, you should be able to respond to my fucking email. Okay.
That's it. Anything else you want to?
No, that's
All right, short and
that's
sweet,
my closing statement.
like an arrow. All right, okay, okay. Oh.
What's gonna be, Andrew?
It's like these two main things, and one of them is difficult because there's anger and sadness. Like they're both thick. Okay. It is disgusting to me that the system does not see how fucked up it is. It is hard for me to see people. I can't do it. I can't do it. I don't know why. I don't know why. I
Can't
don't
say
know.
it.
I don't know what the fuck is going on. Okay. This is some deep layer shit.
Yeah, I mean, I picked a really petty one, so you're going deep.
This is some deep layer shit. Okay.
Maybe try like a, um, maybe it's like bringing up like a lot in this moment, like you're pulling up the tree and all the roots are coming out.
Yeah,
So
it is.
maybe like um, us an annoyance, not like rage.
Okay, I have one. think that's okay. My system is really fighting this because it's like I'm like blanking out as I'm saying this. People need to stop fighting each other because they're acting like fucking idiots and children and literally cult members, like literally fucking cult members. And I feel arrogant saying this, and I feel like I get just as much culty as anyone else. So I'm the same person, but people need to just stop acting like little fucking kids. And we are never going to solve the issues in our society if we don't just fucking start talking to each other and getting over our own bullshit and our own egos. And that's true for all of us.
That's some fucking real shit right there. um, yeah, I feel that. Now I feel like mine was way too heady. I'm like feeling all insecure, like, oh.
No, 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 no. It's perfect. It's perfect. It is so perfect.
I like what you said though because I think it speaks to, seeing um, things in other people that we don't like about ourselves.
Yeah.
And I don't think everyone has that insight.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad we could do that.
Yeah. That was pretty good. Well, and I want to think about it too. Okay. Is there anything you're going to do differently as a result of this conversation?
I feel like I need a support group where literally we just do this. We pick one thing that is bugging the shit out of us and we give ourselves permission to say whatever the fuck comes up without any kind of filter. And we all just have an agreement that we'll just hold space for that.
Yeah. Hmm. Maybe we need to start a support group.
For real. Like,
um, I mean, I think hmm. I really just want to continue to try to be authentic to what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking, and um, trying to notice like when I'm in a pattern with someone and being able to notice it sooner and like talk to them at like when it's happening rather than like being in that pattern for months.
yeah.
um,
Yeah. It's a
yeah,
healthy way to do it.
and I know that may come with time. I think um it's just like repetitive conversations where it's like, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this.
Hmm.
And being able to say, like, I want to do something different.
Yeah.
And work through some of that shame and not worry so much about coming off as accusatory or blunt or whatever. Because I'm tired of everybody wasting each other's time, just beating around the bush.
Yeah.
So I think that's good.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
I think what I can do is I can rein in my hypervigilance with narcissism and reach out to a couple people that I've been putting off conversations with because I've been assuming the worst. I think I can do that.
Yeah. Aw. All right. Can call it good.
All right. Yeah.